Hello, I'm Ariam, and these are all the books that I read in February of 2026. Wow, time is passing, huh? Yes. Anyways, so I read 15 books. I'm pretty sure I DNF'd 3, but I could only find 2. So the 2 that I DNF'd were Come Up and Served Cold by Marian Deeds. I just found the writing style of this to be incredibly boring. I just did not like it. And then I also DNF'd Undead Girl Gang by Lily Anderson, which I felt like it was just missing the mark of what it could have been, of what it was advertised to be. It never really went anywhere for me. Okay, now back to the books that I finished. So, for stats, as I said, I read 15 books. Out of them, 8 were fantasy, 1 was philosophy, 1 was history nonfiction, 2 were not otherwise categorized nonfiction, 1 was science fiction, 2 were science fiction, sorry, 1 was realistic fiction. And as for the age categories, 1 was YA, 6 were adult, and 8 were middle grade. Okay, it's like 18 hours later, but never mind that. Let's just get back into doing these wrap up and talk about the books that I read. So, let's talk about the Avatar comics I read because I finished the Avatar trilogies this month. Also, let's get me some water. So, if you don't know, there are a series of trilogies set after Avatar The Last Airbender, the show ends. So there are 6 of them, and 6 of these little trilogies of comics. So I read the last of the 5th trilogy and all 3 of the 6th one this month. So the last of the 5th trilogy was North and South Part 2, and that was by Jean Lewin Young and illustrated by Goro Hiro. And then I also read Imbalance Part 1, Part 2, and Part 3, which is by Faith Erin Hicks and illustrated by Peter Wortman and Ryan Hill. So let's talk about the illustrations first. They were different, but I liked both of them. I feel like I can't really say that I liked one more than the other. Ryan Hill's and Peter Wortman's illustrations were definitely more like the show, and I like them for that. It felt very much in the style of the show. However, I just love the movement in Goro Hiro's illustrations. There's also differences. Goro Hiro is Goro Hiro is Vera Sisters, so they focused a lot on the characters and, like I said, on the movement, and I love the movement in their illustrations. Whereas, in Peter Wortman and Ryan Hill's illustrations, we actually got to see like a lot of landscape pictures, like just scrolling the comic down and seeing from top to bottom. And I also really, really like that. And just like there was this one picture at the end. I love their covers too. Their covers I actually liked better than Goro Hiro's covers. And there was this one picture in the end of the last comic that just showed the town, and I thought it was a great ending to the comic, to like the whole comics overall. Just the way it was drawn really pulled together all the comics and like all their plots. And then we can talk about the writing. So North and South Part 1, I read Part 3, but I thought it was okay. I have not really liked Jean Lewin Young's writing throughout any of the comics, and I like North and South better than the rest of them, but overall, except for one trilogy, but I just thought it was okay. Then Imbalance, I definitely did think it was better. It wasn't perfect, but I did think the writing was better. And I felt like the storyline was more like uh, together with the Avatar ethics. Uh, I did feel that I did a little feel that Jean Lewin Yang, he managed every comic in this is 71 pages, and I felt like Jean Lewin Yang really did manage to it was a perfect length for him, 71 pages. I did feel a little in these comics that 71 pages is actually a little too long for Faith Erin Hicks, and she struggled to put like an ending to comics number 1 and 2. Obviously, comic 3 was the last of them all, so it definitely needed a little bit longer, and it worked for her for the 71 pages, but I felt like the first 2, she did need a little bit longer. So, let's move on. Now let's talk about another two books I read in a series. I read Drowned Ammit by Diana Wynne Jones and The Spellcoats by Diana Wynne Jones. These are part of the quartet. These are respectively numbers 2 and 3 in the quartet of it's called the Dalemark Quartet, but they're very different. And Drowned Ammit, I didn't love. I read the first book, I think, in January, and that was definitely my least favorite. As I'm reading them, I've grown to like them more and more, but definitely Spellcoats was a step up for me. And they're also not the same plot. Like, you could technically read them out of the order. So, Drowned Ammit, we're following a kid who uh, grows up in tyranny, in a tyrannical ruler. And he basically becomes a terrorist at a very young age. And a bunch of things happen from there. And it's like spoilers to tell anything else. I will say that we also have the point of view of the king's, like, rejected son's children. So I have it in a reading vlog. I have most of these in a reading vlog, I believe. But Drowned Ammit, I liked, but I just felt it was kind of loose and wasn't really pulling everything together. Whereas the Spellcoats, it happens much earlier. It happens way thousands of years earlier than Drowned Ammit, and we're following our main character Tanaki, or Tanakwi, I'm not sure how to pronounce her name, and she lives in a world where she lives in this village. She's lived in this village her whole life, but they look different than the other villagers, and their king is fighting a war against these heathens, and they happen to look like the heathens. So eventually, when they start losing the war, the villagers kick them out, and they end up traveling on this long river, and a bunch of things happen, and everything gets pulled together in the end. And not only does it get pulled together in the end, it gets pulled together throughout the story. I did find that there were some places that were slow, and I know she did that on purpose, but I didn't really like it. But overall, I thought this was a great book. Maybe we can talk a little bit more clearer now. Okay, let's talk about the nonfiction I read. First, let's go get some more water. Okay, I'm back. So the first nonfiction I read was Religion for Atheists, a non-believer's guide to the uses of religion by Alain de Botton. So this guy is an atheist, but he sees that there are some things he likes in religion, specifically Christianity he's really focusing on. He does talk a little bit about Judaism, but mostly he's focusing on Christianity. And so it's basically a philosophy book about what he believes an atheistic society should take from religion. But while I found some of the ideas intriguing, I thought overall that it was not well thought out, that he, obviously this is philosophy, so it has to be subjective, but I felt like he had a hard time separating objective from subjective in his own brain. I also read Kashraju by Tuvia Tenenbaum. This is a book by Tuvia Tenenbaum. He grew up in an ultra-Orthodox anti-Zionist community in Israel. He became non-religious and left, and he lived in the United States and Germany, and became a journalist. And he decides to go back to Israel and basically meet up with a ton of, all the stuff that's going on in Israel. Religious Zionists, religious anti-Zionists, non-religious anti-Zionists, Palestinians, Israeli Arabs, just see what's going on. I thought overall this book was okay. Kind of weirded out about, he does repeat himself a little bit, and I thought the ending, he was getting a little too polemic, but overall I thought it was a good representation of what he saw in Israel. And I believe that's also why it became more polemic, because I think he was writing as he went, and as he saw more and more, and he started getting angrier and angrier, he started getting polemic. Then I also read City of Jinns by William Dalrymple. This is by this guy who went to live in Delhi for a year in 1989 or 1990, something like that. And it's also about him living in Delhi. He's Scottish, by the way. But it's also about the history of Delhi. And I really enjoyed reading about the history of Delhi. I thought it was really interesting and and I really also liked how he set it up, how he started from like nearly modern times, well, for him, nearly modern times, and went back and back and back until like the earliest you can get in prehistory times of Delhi. I did find him, the author, though, to be kind of stuck up and annoying. Then one of then the last nonfiction I read was also my absolute favorite book I read this month, which was last month, The Gilded Page: The Secret Lives of Medieval Manuscripts by Mary Wellesley. So this is what it says in the title. It is basically a book about medieval manuscripts, uh, specifically medieval manuscripts in what is now the UK, mostly focusing on North England and southern Scotland. So this book was set up in different chapters that focuses each on a different type of person who is involved in making the manuscripts, like scribes, authors, artists, and I thought it was just so well written. Like it's so well written that I only have one complaint, and that one complaint is that there were like photos in the back of like different manuscripts that are mentioned, talked about, and they weren't arranged in the order that they were talked about in the book. I'm not sure what order they were arranged in, maybe chronological. I don't know, but it was very annoying reading the book and then being like, oh, there's a picture. I remember seeing the picture of this in the back because obviously I looked at the pictures first, right? And I would go to the back and then I would have to, is it here? Is it here? Is it here? And I would have to find it. That was annoying. But that's like my only complaint. I love this book so much. It was such a great book. Okay, then we can talk about the rest of the books. I read, oh, look at that. It turns out I read North and South Part 2 and North and South Part 3. It doesn't matter. We already talked about North and South. Then we can talk about the rest of the books I read. So I continued 2 series. I read Achofet Gadol by Nadav Naveh. This is a kind of Diary of a Wimpy Kid, Big Nate kind of series, but Israeli. We're following, and in this series, and in this book, our main character goes to his Bnei Akiva camp in the summer, and it's just all about his adventures. I thought it was a little weaker than the other books. I'm not sure. I'm not totally sure why. I think maybe because I personally did not have the money to go to these stuff, so I didn't. So I just don't have the experience. Whereas in the other books, I could very much relate to his experiences. But I think also it is a little bit overly dramatic. Like everything kept on happening to our kid. Like the other books were a bit more realistic in what was happening, whereas here everything kept on happening to this kid in like this 1 week, and it was like it was a little too much. But overall, I love the series, and Daphne is a great writer. Then I also read By the Sword by Mercedes Laquet. Um, so this is actually a reread for me. But wow, and I did enjoy it the first time I read it, but wow, what a change it is. Because basically, in order to read this book, you need to read the Hours of the Queen trilogy, uh, and you need to read the Vows and Honor trilogy. First time I read this, and even the second, I think maybe the third as well, I think I might have read it 3 times before I did this reread. I did not know about the Vows and Honor trilogy, and I was very confused by a lot of the first part and also some things that go on later in the book. And I remember being confused about the stuff that go later in the book. And when I was reading this, I realized I had not remembered a bunch of the first part because I just hadn't understood it because of how much it ties into the Vows and Honor series. So it was so fun being able to read this and finally understand what is going on in this book. Obviously, I did understand. There's a bunch in the middle that I did understand the first times I read this. I do think the ending was kind of like, oh, of course it's gonna happen. Whereas when I read it as a teenager, I was like, oh, yes. Whereas now it's kind of like, oh, of course it's gonna happen. But I think this is one of the strengths of this book, I think, is that Mercedes Laquet, usually when she writes this kind of book where we're following someone so many years, she puts it into a trilogy. And here she has it all in one book. We're following Karen from like age 17 to 37, even past 40 maybe. Not sure, it doesn't have her exact age at the end. And yeah, I think let's see, she starts at 17. She trains like 5 years, so that takes her to 22. Then she's another 10 years, 32. Yeah, she's like 42, 43 at the end of this book. And it just happens so naturally that, like, and you see her character development so naturally. And it's funny because you read the beginning of this book and you get a good idea of who Carolyn is. And the thing is, that doesn't change. And that's what's so great about her character development here. She doesn't change fundamentally, but she does. You know what I mean? Like, but obviously, a person is different at 42 than 17 just because you're more mature and have had experiences. And she's had a lot of experiences. And we really get to see her and also another character change and grow and it feels so natural. And this book actually has some major time jumps. Like there's one time jump that's 10 years, and it doesn't feel at all weird. It feels so natural. So yeah, this book, great. Cover, not so great. Oh, also this book has a lot going on, like a lot of different things going on. It's all written well. I don't always like to read it because it's not always my thing, but like there are some parts that are just like specifically not topics I want to read about, but it's all written well. I think this is one of the most well written books Mercedes Laquet has written. Not my favorite, but one of the like I really like it obviously, but one of the most well written. Now, lastly, a book I own, but I can't hold up because I lent it to my father. I read A Window on the Universe, which was edited by Jennifer Bassett. This is a collection of sci fi stories from like the 40s to 70s, and I absolutely loved it. I think it's one of the best sci fi collections I've ever read. And yeah, obviously there were some stories I liked more, some stories I liked less. Actually, my favorite was a horror story in here that wasn't science fiction at all. But yeah, absolutely highly recommend it. And that's it. Those are all the books I read in February of 2026.